Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Apologies for looking absolutely knackered. You're probably saying, oh, you look like that all the time. It has been a long day. Getting back from Preston, late afternoon on the trains. It's a very long train from Preston. Maybe just at the moment, because it seems to divert all over the shop. But I'm back. Did loads of work until late. Obviously, this is the thing about the transfer windows, that stuff moves so quickly. And even this video, by the time I finish it and get it out there, stuff may well have developed. And this is why I've kind of got my laptop next to me in case there's anything that just happens to change or get a message that alters something. Honestly, it's way easier in the written world. You can kind of adjust to stuff, you can react to stuff, whereas in a video that you've got to record, then upload, which takes a good hour or so itself. There's a danger of saying things that are very much out of date soon. But hey, we keep on going. Right, where do we start? Don't worry, lots of transfer stuff to talk about. But first off, I'm going to start with the match and some bits and pieces that kind of came from that. Some of it's a bit of a crossover as well, I guess, with transfers too. Preston. It was a bit of a wet place, a bit misty. Deepdale's very cool though. That was a proper old school stadium. Love the stadium, and we were quite fortunate that because they're used to doing the press conference in a small room, because there's not many journalists, presumably, that do the press conferences. I did meet some of them, very nice chaps. The reason they moved it to like a bigger, it wasn't even a room, it was like almost an area of the concourse. But what the quite cool thing that it meant was that I got to walk around the pitch to go over there. And you kind of, when you're down there, you get the full kind of feeling of what that stadium's like. And it's, very cool, old school, traditional stadium. But as for the game itself, like I say, played in, wet conditions. The first half was quite a slow, probing affair in terms of Spurs had most of the ball and were just trying to find a way through, and Preston were very, very organised, very compact in the way they played. A little bit like Portsmouth were in the previous round. But I'd probably say maybe Spurs gave them even less of a sniff at goal. Really slurring my words today. That's what not a lot of sleep after a game does to you. I think obviously the difference was in the end quality, and it's having someone like Sonny, who, praise the Lord, was back to real trademark Sonny yesterday. He was, decisive, really. He was the difference, and, we're going to talk about Sonny in a bit, but hopefully, again, we say hopefully, that's the spur for him. So on the night, Spurs had 69% of the possession, 13 shots at goal to Preston's 5, 6 on target compared to the host one, with 5,600 very noisy Tottenham fans in the big kind of stand over to my left. I don't know if it's a Tom Finney stand or not. It did have a massive kind of mural of him on it. As Dan Kilpatrick from the Stand had pointed out, it actually would have been quite fitting in a weird way had Harry Kane played yesterday and scored, because he would have broke the record, Spurs goal scoring record, at a ground where was it Sir Tom Finney? Pretty sure he was 90, wasn't he? Tom Finney was pretty much a one club. I think he was a one club man, but unfortunately didn't win any trophies. And obviously there's parallels there to Harry Kane. He pointed that out. It's a very interesting point, but it never came to be. It never ended up being a narrative anyway. I think the most important thing for Spurs was that Conte was able to make 7 changes, and they won the game 3-0 reasonably comfortably, really. And as Stellini, I've got some quotes in a bit, will say that, actually I've got them here. Just to say, the people who were able to rest, of course, Christian Romero and Hugo Lloris. Physically and mentally, that's a good thing to rest 2 guys that were in the World Cup final and pretty much came straight back into action almost. I think they both missed 1 game. I think that was all it was. So it's good to give them these little breaks to kind of recharge, and you'll probably find that I know obviously Lloris's goalkeeper isn't going to be physically drained, but he's admitted that mentally it was a difficult thing to kind of switch back. And Harry Kane, although he was ill and he missed most of the week in training, other than I think Friday he returned to training, he has, by the time Man City's come around, 13 days between matches for him. We were trying to remember the last time when it wasn't injury related, Harry Kane was able to have that sort of a rest. This is the first time this season he hasn't started a match for Spurs. And also, even in the past, when he was kind of was in the starting 11 for cup matches, he would often come off the bench, mostly because he had to save them. So yeah, this was quite a big thing in that respect, especially with City, being a very tough game coming up. Christian Stellini, assistant manager, was on press conference duties again. This seems to be the Conte thing this season, that Stellini is going to be the man who does all the domestic cup press conferences. I think it almost feels like, because Conte did them himself last season, it's almost like he's realised, oh, you mean there's no Premier League rule that says I have to do these ones? And now he knows that. It's like, yeah, Christian will do it. Yeah, not helpful for Christian, especially as last night he got a tricky question that I would probably say was a little bit unfair to be put towards him as well, about the Sol Campbell chance. Yeah, on one side you could say that the club never really comment on these sort of things, and I've said before, they're not really someone that communicate, they're like the powers that be. So I guess Stellini was the only person, but yeah, I didn't think it quite felt right in those circumstances for him in that kind of makeshift position to have to answer it. So So, difficult situation for him. But here are his quotes on the changes, which were kind of said what I said about how it was quite important that there was no level drop, I think is the main thing to say. We're happy because we started the game like we expected from the team. We made some changes, but nothing changed from the last performance, so we have to be happy for that. We created a comfortable second half because we played a great first half and the ball moved quickly. We have only to wait for the right moment to find a solution like Sonny did, and it was a great performance. We started very well and our pace in the game was high, and we allowed Preston only to try to find the ball, to try to take the ball. They defended very well in the first half, but they ran a lot, and I mentioned the three in the back, which is another quote, because they never allowed them to counter-attack in the first half, and it was a good first half. Then the difference in the second half was Sonny finding the target, and that created the comfort. I think the difference was energy, and they had problems because they ran a lot in the first half, and it's not easy to play against a team like us. The difference, you have to show the difference, and we asked our players to follow the last game against Fulham, and we started it very well again. And he said about Sonny being an important part of Spurs' ambitions in the second half of the season if he's going to maintain that level. It's important. It's important because we spoke a lot about changing the mentality, and what it means to change mentality is really important to have players who didn't play the last game. And if we make changes, the result is the same. For Antonio, it's very important to have a team and a squad where every player plays the same level and nothing changes if you make changes. This is a good point to start because we have a tough schedule and a lot of games to play, with games every 3 days, and we need to have the confidence to make changes. So, Spurs obviously going to find out who they're going to face in the 5th round tomorrow night. Monday night's the draw. I think it's about 7 o'clock, something like that. They're going to be ball number 1, I think I read. So the good thing about the draw at the moment, obviously, means nothing if you end up drawing one of the ones that's left, but there are a lot of Premier League teams gone. There's only 8 other Premier League teams left in the competition, and obviously West Ham and Fulham have still got to get past Derby and Sunderland respectively. So it's not guaranteed that there'll even be 8 by the end of this round. Spurs have got a lot to play for, and the FA Cup, honestly, it needs to be given the attention it deserves, because it probably is, let's be honest, the best chance of silverware. The Champions League, there's some big teams left in that competition, but certainly the FA Cup should really be an achievable one. I say achievable, more achievable, and you could really do with, like, I guess the Manchester clubs drawing each other or something like that, couldn't you, to kind of take one of them out? But I guess it's the old cliche: you have to beat You're going to have to beat someone very good at some point, aren't you? So, going to play them at some point, I guess. One team somehow managing to get all the way without playing anyone difficult. But yeah, so it was a good FA Cup game. It was kind of a classic FA Cup game. Preston fans were really up for it, made a lot of noise. Spurs fans, again, were brilliant. Very, very noisy. Albeit with, some chants going out there on primetime BBC Saturday night, which maybe might not have gone down too well. But that's a bigger, broader subject for another day. But it's a good cup tie though. A good cup tie. I certainly enjoyed it, especially because Spurs won. So you get to write nice positive things rather than at the Riverside Stadium last season when they lost at Middlesbrough and were absolutely atrocious. So it's good. And the main thing I think for me that was brilliant about last night was I got to see one of the best sights in football. And that is Sonny smiling after he smashed in a wonder goal. Honestly, the grin. He kind of almost didn't celebrate to begin with. He was quite almost calm, and then you just saw the big grin burst out. And then everyone kind of mobbed him. The big thing about Sonny for me, and that yesterday, summed him up perfectly in what he brings when he's on form, which, to be fair, is most of the time before this season. And what he does is, when you've got a tight game, when you've got a game against a team that have sat back compactly, whether it's a Premier League team or a team below that level, Sonny has that ability to just drift in from anywhere, take a man out, and then crack in a shot from wherever. We've seen him do it. The ones against Leicester, he's got a couple I always remember at Leicester, Arsenal as well. Just this kind of curling shot that he has on him. And what that does is it absolutely destroys game plans. So if the opposing team is set up to defend against you in rigid lines, if he goes and then does that, which is just the kind of strike that it's world class and it breaks down tactics and game plans, and then the other team has to, come out is the best way. They have to come out, they have to press forward, they have to try and find a goal in response, and that in turn leaves spaces for a team like Tottenham, who we know obviously relish being on the counter-attack. So that's why Sonny, I think, is so important, and why his malaise in form this season, I think, has affected Spurs even more, because they've lost that ability from him that he can do that. I mean, he scored against Leicester again this season, didn't he, with a cracker from distance. So he's just got that ability to do that. Probably better than anyone else in the squad, I'd say. Obviously, Harry Kane scores a few from distance, but I think Sonny is probably more prolific in doing so. And it's such a potent weapon to have. The first goal was trademark Sonny. I love the fact that Japhet Tanganga gets an assist for a very short sideways pass, which is a bit reminiscent of when Vertonghen, obviously different situation, when Vertonghen played the ball to Sonny before he did the massive pitch-long run against Burnley to score. But Tanganga, and it's quite interesting, if you watch the footage back, Tanganga's saying to him, pass it on to, I think it's Basuma coming on. And the fact that Sonny just completely ignores what he says and curls it straight in, left-footed inside the left-hand post. It really is such a superb goal. It really is. And actually, his second goal, I'd say technically, was almost maybe on a par with it, because it had different elements to it. So Ivan Perisic, who was playing the central role, he kind of had a mixed bag. Pass percentage wasn't great. He wasted the ball a lot, but it kind of grew into the role as the game wore on. It was quite interesting to have Sonny on the left, keeping that, and Perisic there. And Perisic plays a lovely flick. If you watch it back, it's absolutely perfect timing. And Sonny's technique in taking it into his path is superb. But then also, he just suddenly stops and spins on a sixpence, turns the defender inside out, and he, absolutely cracks it past the keeper. I think Woodman, the keeper, he managed to get like fingertips on it, but it wasn't enough. So I actually felt the quality of that goal was pretty much on a par with the first strike. Just brilliant. And an assist from Perisic to Son. Do you remember there was all that kind of feeling that Perisic and Son weren't quite combining? Well, there you go. There's a Perisic setting up Son situation. A lovely little combination. So Sonny told BBC after the game, I needed those goals for my confidence. As a striker or as an attacking player, the important thing is you get that goal. It's important that I could help the team go into the next round, and I'm very, very happy. Look, we know the challenge for Sonny now is to maintain that. You know, we've had the 3 matches before this season. Was it Champions League game, Leicester game, the Palace game, where he's scored and we've kind of felt he's alive, and then he's gone quite quiet in the next one. So the challenge now, of course, is to maintain that. A whole little side note on Sonny. There was a lovely moment, I think, when they were coming onto the pitch, and the little Spurs mascot, little girl next to him, you could see she was just in her kit and she was shivering, and you could see him saying to her, "Do you want my warm-up jacket?" kind of thing. And so he takes off like the zip-up warm-up jacket they have and like puts it around. It was such a kind of I guess a dad moment. It was just such a gentlemanly moment. It was so nice. You know, when he eventually has kids, he's going to be such a great dad. If he has kids, you know, maybe he doesn't want kids, but he does seem to be very good with children. It was just a really nice moment that kind of just kind of summed up what a good human being Sonny is. And now the challenge for him is to push on with it, because obviously we've got 6 goals in the last 3 matches, but they haven't really sparked into anything else. I asked Delaney after the game, I asked him the first question just about the match, which is that big quote I read out earlier. But I also asked him whether Sonny, whether these goals, you know, will they give him the confidence to kind of keep going, I guess. They were the only 2 questions I asked, despite what some people might have claimed on Twitter. But enough of that. Where was it? I've got his quote here. It says, absolutely yes, as in big night for his confidence. He's a top player. He has only to wait for the right moment and feel comfortable to find the space to attack and to play 1v1, and this evening was a good game for him. And it was also, I think it was Dan sat behind me, put to Stellini, does Sonny kind of rise to the occasion? Does he take an extra responsibility on his shoulders when Kane is out? Which is a really good question, because it's true. We've seen it enough times. I mean, obviously the biggest ones have been in the Champions League at Man City and stuff like that. When Kane has been out injured, Sonny stepped up for the team. And Stellini seemed to agree with that. He said, I think so. We can feel this from Sonny, and without Harry, he was the most important striker for us, and we played with Perisic not in his perfect position. So Sonny was important to find a way to score and to let the team win. And talking about Kane and Son, I think it's gone a little bit under the radar because of Kane chasing or equaling Jimmy Greaves' record. And Sonny is actually creeping up that leaderboard himself. Obviously, because he hasn't been smashing in the goals like he was last season. Yeah, I think we've kind of forgotten that he is slowly moving up there. So I looked at it. He's 139 goals for Tottenham. Do you know what? Only 6 players in the history of the club have scored more than him, which is really impressive. I must admit, I didn't realise how far he'd gone up the list. He overtook George Hunt on Saturday night. He had 138. Next one in sight is Jermaine Defoe, who's 143. And then the next after that will be Cliff Jones, is on 154. So yeah, honestly, he's moving up that kind of list of all-time goal scorers. I think another point or another person I hope will push him is Arnold Danjuma, who we got to see our first glimpse of in a Spurs shirt, and it was a bit of a dream debut for him, you know, we have to say. He turns 26 on Tuesday, transfer deadline day. Obviously arrived from Villarreal on loan with an option to buy for what is roughly about £21 million. Predominantly plays on the left-hand side, so he's going to really provide competition for Son as well. But when he came on Saturday, he played in the centre. And do you know what? I know he's played there before, but he looked very suited to it. He's got a big lad. He's quite mobile as well. And you could see his attacking movement was really good. He was constantly on the move. And that's pretty much what kind of brought his goal. Basuma drove through the middle. It was a really good run. Bryan Gil took the ball on. Had another bright little cameo. It's so frustrating for him. Another bright little kind of cameo. Took the ball on. Knocked it out to Kulusevski, who got to the byline, pulled the ball back to Danjuma. And he actually scuffed the ball, but it ended up being the absolutely perfect touch he needed to send it rolling into the far corner. Obviously, he was delighted. He did his trademark goal celebration, which is kind of almost looks like his, you know that cardboard box dance move. It was a bit like that. So yeah, great for him. Absolutely roared at the Spurs fans he did over there. Nice to score in front of a massive stand full of Spurs fans on your first game. Yeah, he was good. It was a good little cameo and a good little kind of sighter of or glimpse of what we're going to see from him going forward. No, I liked him. I think scoring on his debut is a good start. You know, we've seen other Spurs attackers, strikers, whatever you want to call them, come in the past, and they've struggled to get that first goal for a little while. Obviously, Vincent Janssen is the one that springs to mind. He had a big chance his debut, didn't he? Maybe a sliding doors moment. But Danjuma's gone and done it first. Steven Bergwijn is probably, quite apt in that he was another guy that did that, a Netherlands international, his Netherlands international teammate as well. Obviously did it against Man City, that cracking goal. But I guess the task now for Danjuma is to get more game time than Bergwijn did. Both playing similar positions, although I'd say physically Danjuma is probably more suited to being able to also play as that central striker, whereas I always felt Bergwijn, when he did it, he worked hard, he tried to hold up the ball, but he was never going to be a bit of a target man, which you think Danjuma looks like he could be as well. He looks to drive with the ball at his feet all the time. And Stellini said of him afterwards, Danjuma, it was a good start for him to score in his first game. We're looking forward to working with him. We have to discover this guy. He can play in many positions in the three in front. One option, obviously, Spurs didn't have on Saturday was Richarlison. I think he kind of gave away his non-inclusion by the fact that he rocked up at the under-21s to watch Lucas Moura. We'll talk a bit about Lucas Moura to come, but Lucas Moura made a bit of a tentative kind of return. I'll explain that a bit later. Played 45 minutes and Richarlison rocked up at the Lamex Stadium with a sign that said something like, Lucas Moura, can I have your shirt, please? Which was all very funny. But obviously, the fact that he was there and the team had already travelled to Preston kind of gave the game away a bit that something wasn't quite right. And what it turned out to be is a little adductor muscle injury, just a little one. He's expected to be back for the Man City game. But it's just, on the surface, it's not a great look. He's the big Spurs signing of the summer, £60 million. And he hasn't really made his mark yet. And I think the injuries have played a part. Obviously, probably the biggest mark he's made this season is at the World Cup for Brazil, which is of no real use to Tottenham. He started just 5 Premier League matches this season, 4 in the Champions League, and made 9 substitute appearances. And obviously, he's only weighed in with 2 goals. They both came in the same match against Marseille, albeit a match-saving kind of performance. But at least this one's a smaller injury, and it's not the hamstring problem he had before. Here's Stellini's quotes for you. He had a small problem in the last few days. We tried to recover him, but it was not a good idea to recover him. We had just Harry Kane sick, and so it was not a good idea to risk him. We will find Richarlison next week. He was asked if it was the hamstring injury again. No. It was a different injury. He recovered well. He has a small problem in his adductor, but nothing special. I read that a bit like a country gent. No. It sounds nothing like that. He's just, quite Italian. Speaks very good English. But, he's quite good still. He gets straight to the point. There's no messing around. There's no repeating himself. He just cracks on. When you look at that, and you look at the fact that, when Richarlison's back and you've got Danjuma added to that, and you've potentially got one of, or maybe both, although I don't know, of Bryan Gil and Lucas, that's a lot of attacking options suddenly for Conte to call upon. And, this is what he's always said. He wants game changers. He wants the ability to just mid-game change things, take out underperforming players, and also the byproduct is that these other players push the players in the starting 11 to play better. So, yeah, hopefully he's got that now. Sonny obviously took all the headlines, but I do want to say a word or two about the defence, and also use Basuma in front of them, because there were 3 players put together that have all had criticism this season about their defensive displays. Japhet Tanganga, Davinson Sanchez and Clement Longley. But you know what? They were so good on the night that Fraser Forster didn't have a single shot to save. I think I said earlier that Preston had 1 shot on target, but I genuinely cannot remember it. So it must have been something quite weak that rolled through to him, because I do not remember him having any saves to make. Look, I know people would say, oh, it's a championship side and it's a Preston side that haven't scored a lot of goals, but they didn't even let them have shots, really. And it was honestly the only wobble I can remember, and it was more of an unfortunate one, was Davinson Sanchez was trying to close down a man who was trying to run through, and the ball over the top hit Sanchez on the back of his heel. But he was quite fortunate. It ended up just kind of bouncing over his head, and I think it went through to Forster. So it was just an unlucky moment. It wasn't like a moment of bad defending. Overall, I thought all 3 of them were really good. And Sanchez, he was quite an organiser. He played in the centre. Obviously, he wasn't playing in the playmaker role that we'll see Eric Dyer play when he plays there, like pinging passes. He was just in there and he was organising, constantly seeing him pointing and shouting at the others and kind of where to be. And I think that's why he was captain. I know some people have wondered, like maybe why someone like Sonny, I guess, more longer serving, wasn't captain. But I think it was purely for the organisational side of that defence and making sure that everyone was where they were meant to be. Of course, you don't need a captain's armband to do that, but yeah, that seemed to be. I presume that was the reasoning. And you know what? They helped Spurs keep their 4th clean sheet in 6 matches. Who would have thought wasn't it something like 21 goals in 10 matches? We'd be talking about 4 of the last 6 being clean sheets. That's progress. That's a turnaround. It's not something that, we'd really kind of have paid much attention to. Yes, of course, one's been against Portsmouth, one's been against Preston. But of course, the others have been Palace and Fulham as well. So, 2 teams they've gone away to and managed to keep clean sheets at places against informed teams, especially at home. So, yeah, I don't think it should be sneered at or sniffed at or whatever you want to do at it. I thought they played well. And Stellini afterwards especially was kind of trying to big them up, and also Sanchez. We're happy for that. This was about Son. He said, we're happy for that, but I also want to mention the 3 at the back. Actually, no, it was Danjuma. We're happy for that, but I also want to mention the 3 at the back because they played a really good game. Sanchez was captain. It was a good match for Patron and all the 3 at the back. The 3 in the back never allowed Preston to counter-attack, especially in the first half. Patron, they call him. And bearing in mind, Tanganga and Sanchez have both been linked with moves away, haven't they, really? This late kind of stage in the window. I can't see, unless Spurs find a replacement for them in these last days of the window, I think it would be difficult to see Conte wanting to let them go. You could maybe get away with Tanganga going out, possibly at a push, but you are still leaving yourself short if you have a couple of injuries. So I do wonder whether we end up seeing both of them stick around. And to be honest, it's so difficult for defenders to come in without having a rhythm and a run of matches under their belt. And we do, myself included, judge them quite harshly sometimes. But yeah, they are absolutely perfectly adequate squad players. Whether they'll end up being here next season, I think Sanchez and his contract will be an interesting one. I think Tanganga will want first team football. For the rest of this season, there's absolutely no reason why they can't still do a very good job for Tottenham. Yves Bissouma, I wanted to talk about him, didn't I? He's someone obviously who it it's not gone as he would have wanted thus far. Let's be honest, a bit like Richarlison, a big, albeit not in fee because of his contract status, but he was a big signing in the summer. A lot of other clubs were a bit like, wow, Spurs done some great business there. So it's been a disappointment for him, and no doubt for the club as well. And we kind of got a rare chance to see him and Bentancur together. And I actually felt that probably Bissouma impressed me more. Bentancur had kind of, all of his normal highlights, as in composed and nice turners on the ball. I think he did one absolutely lovely pirouette, but then he gave the ball away, so it didn't really mean anything. But I felt Bissouma was very, very disciplined. I've got his stats. I've written down some of the things. He made 2 key passes, made that driving run for Spurs' 3rd goal, and at the back he completed 1 tackle, 1 interception and 2 clearances. And what I love about him is, and this is something that I think we saw more of him across a whole season, but for Spurs I've noticed it when he's playing, with not meaning any disrespect, but I guess lesser opposition. He has this kind of air of arrogance, and the good kind of arrogance. This kind of really dominant feeling when he's on the pitch, and you can see the way he plays. I also saw it in watching him in some of the friendlies as well, when he was playing teams, that were like, the teams they played. 3 teams. You could see he absolutely kind of bosses the game, and he knows he's going to boss it. And the thing was, he was doing that for Brighton in games against the top half teams and stuff like that. So there's no reason he can't do it for Tottenham. He just feels like a little bit like Sonny, like his confidence just taking a bit of a bash. It has. And I actually asked Stellini in Friday's press conference about Bissouma. I'm just trying to find a quote. Here it is. And he kind of feels that it's the adaptation of him from being a regular guaranteed starter to being a person that is coming in and out of the team. And that is something mentally I think he's also trying to get used to. And he says he hasn't been able to rediscover last season's form yet because it's different, the club he plays for, a different expectation on every game. Bissouma, when you change the club, you need to understand quickly the moment. Sometimes when you play every game, then you start to be a player that gives rotation to your team. It's not easy for Bissouma, but for all the players. You have to understand what is your position in the team and what the team needs from you. Not in every club is it the same. Maybe Biss needed time. At the moment, we're happy with him. He's a player we can use in every game. Honestly, he's been one of the best Premier League players in recent years. Best Premier League midfielders in recent years. And I think he, Conte, and the coaching staff just need to find a way to unlock that at Spurs, because he's another one who, for the second half of the season, could have a massive impact really on what's going on at the club. So we shall see. But I did think he was very good yesterday. Again, albeit against Preston, but you can only play who's in front of you. Right, let's move on to transfer stuff, as we're at the halfway stage, and I've probably covered most of the match that I need to. Pedro Porro. It's the only place to start, really, isn't it? As he is the one we are awaiting. Obviously, you will have seen the images or video footage of him playing in his League Cup final with Sporting, and kind of seems to wave at the fans, applauds them, and he's touching his badge the whole time as well. And I just felt timing-wise, it was kind of a night when he was doing that, and obviously preparing for the move he hopes is going to happen. Whereas back at Spurs, the wing-backs weren't really doing what they needed to do on such a night when Spurs are hoping to bring him in that door. Matt Doherty was very quiet indeed, just kind of at the worst possible time. I know he's on the other side, but I want to mention Ryan Sessegnon. It's a difficult one for me. Defensively, I looked at his numbers, they were the best in the team, which actually surprised me. I didn't know that during the game, and I actually gave him the lowest mark, gave him a 4 in my player ratings. But his defensively, 4 tackles, 2 interceptions and 1 clearance, which was by far the best Spurs defensive stats on the day. But going forward, he was quite ponderous at times. He had 6 crosses, none of them found a teammate. I think he played 9 long balls and only 1 of them found a teammate. got his passing stats 70.6%, which was worse than all bar 2 players in the Spurs starting 11, which was Ivan Perisic 68.8 and Fraser Forster 54.6. So yeah, not a good day for him. And I said this before, but if he doesn't pick up his form, I'm a little bit worried for it. Well, quite worried for him about what comes next season, because Destiny Udogi's on the way. And, he's going to be some player by the looks of it. So, yeah. Conte does like him, but he's got a lot of work to do, I think, as well. There we go. Sorry, I was just getting some messages and I was just checking those as well. Again, I want to try and put as much latest stuff as I can in these because things change so quickly. Yeah, so Romero. I should just also mention, not Romero, Emerson Royale. He came on, didn't really offer much going forward. So yeah, so my point originally was about Porro, going back to him, was that all of the wing backs on the night didn't really show why he's not needed, because he is desperately needed, unfortunately, just because of the way things have worked out this season. And look, if Porro does come through the door, and we hope it does happen, you can't guarantee anything right now, especially like Sporting have made life a little bit difficult, to put it mildly, for Spurs, which is only fair because Spurs do this to every single team they try and buy a player, tried to buy a player from them. So it is almost apt, I guess. But if he were to come in, then you've got a very exciting right-hand side. Romero, Bentancur, Porro, Kulusevski. Obviously others can interchange with him, but that's very exciting in itself. Yeah. So we shall see. We shall see with that. Sorry, you can see I'm getting more messages in. I was saying about Bryan Gil. Yes. So back to Porro though. We'll talk about Bryan Gil in a little bit. The exciting thing about him for me, 23 years old, he's very much one for the now, but also one for the future, which is exciting. And I've said this before, so I'm not going to go into it too much. Plenty of experience, more than 100 games across top flight in Portugal and Spain. Also, I think he's had a couple of seasons of Champions League football now as well. But he will have to adapt to the Premier League, despite the fact he used to be on City's books, because from what I could tell, unless I've missed something, he seemed to constantly go out on loan rather than being in and around City. So I don't think he's ever really adapted to kind of English culture properly, or I don't even know if he's played any kind of like under-21s football and things like that for City. I couldn't see any when I had a kind of cursory look earlier. Obviously, Spurs have also had another Spanish fullback who had to try to become a wing-back in Sergio Reguilon. Obviously, everything started very well for him, but never really took to the wing-back role. Porro's a bit different. Obviously, he is more of a natural wing-back, although I did really feel that Reguilon was going to be perfect for that spot, but never really happened. Yeah. And what I found quite interesting is that since the links to Porro have happened, he's actually really been upping the attacking game. It's almost like he's been saying, Antonio, look. I've looked at it. He's now got, and he's got a couple of assists and goals in the last month or so, often in the same game. I think he's had an assist and a goal. And he's got 11 assists and 3 goals this season, which means 14 goal involvements in 25 matches, which for a wing-back is superb, let's be honest. And, for someone like Conte, who we know wants his wing-backs to be defenders / auxiliary strikers, wingers, whatever you want to call them, they have to be at the back post trying to head in across from the other side. So, yeah, it's an interesting kind of fit for Tottenham, because I do think he ticks a lot of the boxes. Like I say, played in the Taça de Portugal final, the League Cup final last night. There was a little moment when I didn't see it. I wasn't watching it, but I was kind of doing some post-Preston stuff. But I saw a little screenshot of someone's live blog of the match, and it said, like, he goes down with an injury. This looks bad. It's like, oh, he's up. I can imagine in that moment, all Spurs fans were like, no. But yeah, he seems to have been okay, and I think he finished the game as well. But he didn't. Obviously, they didn't win 2-0. They lost to Porto. So, I saw people saying, oh, he's preparing life for Spurs, didn't win a trophy. But he has won trophies before. I think he's won that final twice before, but he's also won the Portuguese League Championship. So he's a title winner. He is, and he will bring that little bit of experience as well. And look, the transfer itself, we know this has been a prolonged one. You do wonder whether Spurs could have moved quicker, especially for the price that they're going to end up paying. Sporting have made life tricky for them at times. They've been very firm on kind of first that they wanted to keep the player, and then in not really wanting to negotiate too much away from what they wanted. I'm so wary of even saying this because we know, but just going on the way this has happened, and obviously any time that there's been an update from Portugal, I've kind of spoken to people in and around the club and they were like, no, it's nowhere near that kind of degree of being complete yet. And that's in previous days. It's very, very quiet around Spurs at the moment because I still think Sporting aren't quite making this an easy ride to the finish line for Tottenham. But from what I can gather, having spoken to various people, is that the plan, the schedule, was for Porro to have his medical tomorrow. Obviously, he's got to be in England first for that to happen. I think I saw that he was at Sporting today training, or I guess it would be recovery rather than training. So clearly he was still there then. But from what I understand, the plan was, barring any unexpected delays from the Sporting end, was that he was going to have his medical tomorrow. Hopefully that is the case. And it sounded like the clubs were getting closer to, or pretty much almost there on a compromise over the deal, which will see them pay about 45 million euros, which is about 39.5 million pounds. So I think it's the same as the release clause was. There's lots of different talk about the release clause, whether it's still active, whether it was only active for a certain amount of time, whether it's something that I saw one saying it was only active in the summer. There's lots of different talk about the release clause, but everyone kind of agreed that it was this 45 million euros. It sounds like that's roughly what Spurs are going to end up paying. I think they're going to pay it in sections. I've heard one suggestion it might only be in 2 sections, but whether it ends up being more, I don't know. But essentially, I guess it needs to get to a degree where Sporting are entirely happy and then they release the player to be able to do that medical, which was planned for the Monday. Because if they don't, then that's got to wait till deadline day and it all starts to get a little bit nervy. So we'll see where that goes. That's why I'm saying I'm so loath to say, because this has been that kind of deal where we've had lots of kind of journalists on from various countries and stuff putting out stuff that it was done or it was almost done, and everything I've been hearing is like, not yet. It's still kind of a little bit dicey at those points. And then today I've heard a lot more that it's closer to the finish line, but still, still some little elements to get done. So hopefully this medical takes place tomorrow. It's not the worst thing in the world if it ends up getting cancelled and pushed to Tuesday, but like I say, it gets into squeaky bum time, to quote Sir Alex Ferguson, who wasn't talking about transfers. Let's see what happens with that one. But it's definitely a hell of a lot further down the line than it was, a few weeks back. It's now far more of a possibility, and obviously we know Porro wants to come, and I do wonder if Sporting do make it difficult in the final stages, whether he then has a problem with that, because he does seem, from everything I've heard, to be quite kind of keen to make the move. I think he knows he's going to come to Tottenham and be there, probably first choice right back, isn't he? Let's be honest, right wing back. So, so that's Pedro Porro. So the little scenario that I kind of said about in December looks like it's going to take place, hopefully. If you don't remember, I said back then that Spurs were going to prioritise a right wing back and an attacking player. One a loan and one a permanent transfer and one a loan to buy. So if Porro comes in, that's those 2 boxes ticked, which is great. I said this before, and I will continue to say it again, they will continue to monitor the market for any late opportunities that arise from to bring forward the summer plans, mainly defender and central midfielder, centre-back and a central midfielder. I think the goalkeeper, it's too difficult to get a goalkeeper mid-season, so you'd think that sticks to being a summer thing. But I really like to say this because I said this in my piece earlier and it immediately went out on aggregators and people got very like, oh. So the feeling right now is at the moment, because obviously we don't know whether any of these opportunities are going to rise, because that's why they're called late opportunities. At the moment, the feeling is that Porro, they can get it over the line. That ends up being the last transfer. And that's because you can't foresee a late opportunity arising. And it very well may do. So yeah, when that went out as a single kind of quote with aggregators, people are like, oh my God, only 2 transfers. What I would say is only 2 transfers last January, and it worked out very well. But yeah, look, I know people want to see the defence have an upgrade, and you know you can't rule it out. It'd be daft to at this stage say that's them done, because you don't know what happens probably on Tuesday. Often Monday night is when these like late deals start to kind of rear their head as a possibility. And then on Tuesday, sometimes you get the odd frantic one towards the end that wasn't even considered. So I wouldn't rule it out entirely. I think you'd be daft to. But let's think centre-backs. It was Milan Skriniar, of course, they were linked with. Pretty much Spurs have distanced themselves from that name for the last few weeks. And obviously it looks like it's because he's pretty much nailed on to go to PSG. I think he's even been talking about it himself today. Obviously there's Piero Hincapi, if I'm pronouncing that right, which I'm probably not. If you're not aware who he is, 21-year-old Bayer Leverkusen centre-back. Spurs definitely do have an interest in him. He's slightly on the shorter side for a centre-back. I think he's 6 foot, which obviously is not a short person, but for a Premier League centre-back, normally they're a little bit bigger than that. What's happened with him is his value is absolutely skyrocketed after the World Cup. I've even seen some people saying he might be worth 80 million and stuff like that. From what it seems to be, I think a summer deal is more likely for anyone really trying to get him. I don't think Leverkusen are keen to sell at all. Maybe the only way you get him this month is if someone were to buy him and then loan him back, perhaps. But that would be an expensive deal to then loan back that player. It's the kind of deal, I dread to say it, but it's the kind of deal that someone like Chelsea would maybe do. But yeah, Spurs, if they're going to do a loan back, I mean, Sarr and Udogie were probably the 2 most expensive examples of that I can remember. I'm trying to think if there's anyone else. Normally Spurs want their player for now, really. So yeah, maybe one to keep an eye on. But I do wonder what the competition is going to be like for him in the summer. But certainly a player that Spurs really like. I saw a little report today on Twitter about Jobe Bellingham, Jude's younger brother, and Spurs like maybe trying to get him. From what I understand, Spurs have definitely scouted him along with pretty much every club in the Premier League, but there's kind of a feeling that he's going to join Jude, whether that is at Borussia Dortmund or wherever Jude Bellingham may end up moving on to. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure whether that's one that will come to fruition or not. I think it's more likely he's going to do that. He's only 17, plays for Birmingham City, if you weren't aware. But as for young players, there is a young player that Spurs do look like they're about to sign, and he does have a medical tomorrow. So you could end up with a possibility of Porro and this young man both having their medical tomorrow, if Sporting give the go-ahead. Please give the go-ahead. So I'm going to get this name right. Jude Soonsup-Bell. He is, I think he qualifies technically nationality English, and I think it's Thailand as well. Oh, I've lost it. I had a screen which was on there. So let me tell you a little bit about him. This deal looks like it is going to go through. Jude Soonsup-Bell is only 19 years old. He turned 19 this month. The little backstory behind this: he is a Chelsea youngster. striker. Made his debut for Chelsea in the Carabao Cup last season under Thomas Tuchel. He's, seen as quite a talent. Chelsea wanted to sign him to a new contract, but talks stalled and they couldn't get it done. So he is out of contract this summer. Man City made him an offer, from what I understand, and made an offer, and so have, I think, a few teams from abroad. But it looks like Spurs are going to get him in. What I think it's going to be, from what I understand, is a free transfer, but with Chelsea having negotiated a sell-on fee if or when Spurs do sell him on. He seems quite a prospect. I was looking up his numbers. It looks like he's stepped up to the under-21s more recently, but certainly for the under-18s, scored a lot of goals. He's had something like 23 goals in 25 matches for the under-18s. He's quite the goal scorer. I saw when I broke the news earlier about Spurs trying to get him, and the various Chelsea aggregator accounts took it and put it out, and I could see there was quite a mix of comments. There were a few people, you never know whether they're just annoyed that he's going, and they were like, oh, he's rubbish anyway, take him. But you've got quite a few fans that were genuinely gutted, and they think he's going to be something. And I think the fact that Man City and various big teams from abroad were trying to get him suggests that he's going to be quite a good young player. So medical tomorrow, that's what I'm told, and this free transfer with a sell-on clause in there as well. Obviously, his contract comes to an end at this summer, so that's why he's on a free for now. What the plan is for him, that I understand, is initially going to come in and plug a bit of a gap in the academy. Will Lancashire they've got up front, but they don't have many kind of Jamie Donnelly's another who can play up front, but they're kind of lacking numbers in the under-18s and under-21. So he's going to come in initially for the rest of the season to sort that. But I think the plan is to then loan him out in the summer and then very kind of quickly push on his development. Maybe he'll be involved in pre-season. You'd imagine he probably will. So unless they organise an early loan. So yeah, keep an eye out for him. Look, I know it's not the sexy, exciting, huge money transfer that people want. And I think some people underneath the first team don't really care about what happens. But if Spurs can, take someone from their rivals. It's quite rare in itself, Chelsea and Spurs dealing with each other, by the way, as well. But if they can take someone from one of their rivals and they can turn him into a bit of a superstar, then why not? It's a deal where they're spending nothing and then have to pay later. So it's a classic Tottenham deal, isn't it, really? So yeah, keep an eye on him, I would say. Jude Soonsup-Bell. The other thing I wanted to talk about, which I'm sure everyone loves me talking about, is the Champions League numbers. So 17 is what the limit you're allowed in the Champions League for non-locally trained players. Danjuma has taken that to 18. And of course, if Pedro Porro does arrive at Tottenham Hotspur like he and we all hope, then that will go up to 19. Obviously 2 over the limit, which would mean in the next European squad, 2 people would have to be taken out of it. That, for me, makes a departure for Bryan Gil or Lucas Moura, most likely. I'd say probably Bryan Gil is going to be the most likely that. I know Sevilla are really trying to make something happen on that front. There's been talk about a loan. There's also been talk about a loan to buy. Personally, I think it probably will end up just as a loan at the moment. And I think a lot of Spurs fans would be gutted if there was a loan to buy in there, to be honest, an option to buy, because I really think if they send him back to La Liga and he ends up going permanently, I think he becomes a star. I don't see why he can't adapt to the Premier League. Every time I see him, I think he looks more and more settled in the Premier League, which is such a shame because in terms of he's just gone so far down the pecking order now, because obviously Danjuma's come in, and although he's on the left, that means that Richarlison then is definitely can be on the right or something. And I was looking at it all. I mean, actually, let's talk about Lucas first, and we'll put it all together. So Lucas Moura, if you haven't been aware, hasn't been around for much of this season. He's had an inflamed tendon inflammation issue. And the main problem with that is every time they think he's okay, he has a couple of good days, he will then have some bad days. So even I think in the last video I said he didn't have a return date in mind, or they weren't sure of a return date. And then what happened was after that video, he had a couple of good days. And I presume it was suggested to him, well, since you've had a couple of good days, why don't you try playing a match? Which is why he kind of ended up doing the under-21s game against Arsenal. And he scored. He only played, I think, the first 45 minutes, but he did score a goal. And I think the thing with Lucas now is it's absolutely imperative that he then has a run of good days after that. Because this isn't really anything different to what's gone in the past. It just happens that he's played a match within the good days. So now they need to keep a close eye on him and see exactly what happens with his body in the days ahead and see whether this actually is him turning the corner or just continuing this pattern with this problem. But obviously when it comes to Lucas, there's other factors involved as well because, as I said, Spurs didn't take the option in December to extend his contract by another 12 months, which means he's a free agent in the summer, which means he knows that Spurs don't want to keep him. So, from what I understand, Lucas is open to leaving this month. My issue with that is, unless they were able to get a late deal for another attacker to come in, I can't see how Conte would sanction both Lucas and Gil going. I think it will be one or the other. And I'd imagine, as I said last week, when Conte looks at Bryan Gil, he's a small child. I think he will see an experienced Lucas, if they can get him fit, as probably a more trustworthy. I put it in quote marks because it's not my opinion. I personally think that Bryan Gil has a higher ceiling for me than Lucas. But also I do fully look at the fact that Lucas has had some big matches for Tottenham. And, you know, if you are, you know, going to play in these big matches as the season goes on, then, you know, he's scored goals against the bigger teams as well. So I can kind of get it. And if you just look at the front three, because this is the key for Conte, this is why you can definitely let one of them go. You've got Son and Danjuma on the left, Kane and Richarlison in the middle, and then Kulusevski and one of Lucas or Bryan Gil on the right. And you also, on top of that, you've got Danjuma and Richarlison can play on the left if required. Danjuma can play in the centre, and Richarlison can also play on the right as well. So Richarlison is your kind of cover-all positions type player. So that would be the only thing I could maybe see of both of them going without having a replacement. But I think Conte, I just think he'd be scared of doing that. I mean, with Lucas, you know, I'm sure that Spurs would probably just let him go this month if he were to find another club. Because even, you know, I can't see anyone paying a fee for him at this stage, but you are then getting his wages off the books. I suppose Bryan Gil's a loan exit would be more financially beneficial because you'd like to get a loan fee and also his wages off the books. So yeah, it probably ends up being more financially beneficial. If you'd think he probably earns less a week than Lucas, I'd imagine, at their stages of their careers. But yeah, we shall see with those two. I think Bryan Gil is the one. Like I say, I think Sevilla, their manager's come out and said that he really likes him and he wanted him before at Marseille. So I'd imagine they'll drive that and try and get him back to Sevilla. He came from Sevilla, didn't he? So, yeah, personally, I hope it's just a loan. I'm going to see him go, to be honest. But if he gets a loan and he plays every week, then I think development-wise, that's huge for Tottenham. And we've said it before, Conte may not be here next season. So the next manager might think, what a gem. And look to really develop him. So, the other issue actually on that as well is, if Bryan Gil goes, that's one of those Champions League spots gone. So you're back down to 18 if Porro comes in. Please let Porro come in because it's going to be such a meltdown. And I think that's the reason why Spurs would push it through even if there are any late issues at the sporting end. Because I think Daniel Levy must be aware if this deal doesn't get through, the meltdown would be huge and the outcry and any noises, there were more chance at Preston of Levy out and it was like a full stand, the full, like almost 6,000 fans. Oh, if Porro doesn't go through and it would be seen as them messing it up. Yeah, it would not be a pleasant atmosphere. What was my point? Sorry, yes. So, who else do you not register for the Champions League? That's a big call because I think the obvious idea would be, if you're not entirely sure of his fitness, would be Lucas Moura. But then Lucas Moura has big Champions League experience on the biggest of nights. So that's a tough call. The only other one is maybe someone like a younger player like a Pape Matar, but then that's also is leaving you. I guess you've still got 4 in the centre midfield. Maybe that's the way. That's a tough thing to say to a young player. I remember when Poch had to say it to Juan Foyth, and he has honestly said it was one of the hardest things he'd had to do was to tell this young player that he would not be playing in the Champions League. I think Jose Mourinho had to do it as well. But yeah. So we shall see with them. The other overloaded area of the squad, obviously, is right wing back. That's where you could potentially lose another Champions League foreign player spot, non-locally trained spot. You've got, obviously, Emerson Royal and Matt Doherty are both considered non-locally trained. Doherty, because of this rubbish ruling that, well, technically, I guess he's not British because he started his career before the age. Essentially, he didn't move to Wolves from the Republic of Ireland until after the time that he would have had to be registered as a locally trained one. So if Porro does come in, I'm sure Spurs will listen to offers for both players. Although I'd imagine if I'm Conte, I'm probably thinking Matt Doherty's more versatile because he'll cover the left for you as well. But obviously with Emerson, we know he's not that keen on leaving. But then I've never got the sense that Matt Doherty is either. But then I guess if you tell either player, look, Porro's coming in, hopefully. This is so Tottenham, so you really can't say anything's done until they are holding that shirt. But yeah, if you're telling them that Porro is going to be the first choice and they're not going to play as many minutes, or someone's not, then maybe you just got to move for your own benefit, really. Obviously, there's Jed Spence as well. I don't think he really affects anything non-locally trained wise. He would come under the homegrown players, but not the club trained one. He'd be association trained players. There's 2 different ones of that. When I started this video, there hadn't been any developments with him in terms of the interested parties. Like I said before, Spurs have been considered or are willing to consider loan offers for him, have been turning down thus far anything with a loan or obligation to buy, including, from what I understand, an obligation to buy a loan from Brentford. Brentford obviously interested Leicester, Southampton, Crystal Palace, Bayer Leverkusen, Lyon, among others that are interested in him. Obviously missed out on the matchday squad again on Saturday in the FA Cup, of all things as well. I know it was a stronger squad, but still. So, there is no real kind of... There's no need for him to be sticking around right now because he's not going to get minutes unless there's a massive injury crisis with another right wing back, hopefully, to come in through the door. So, yeah, get out there and then see what the situation is in the summer. Harvey White, from what I understand, Spurs have given the okay for him to go out on loan. As long as there's a deal that they approve. I think there's a few clubs interested in Harvey, so he needs that. He hasn't had a loan move since Portsmouth. Obviously made his Premier League debut this season when he came on at Palace. So that would be great for him if that comes off. I'd imagine Spurs will be considering offers for Alfie Devine as well, loan offers. It's one of those where obviously the academy side is struggling a little bit, so you kind of think, oh, he's like one of the best young players. Do you keep him for that? But then also professionally for his development, I don't think that's good for the long term. I do think he needs a loan. Dane Scarlett will stay at Portsmouth. From what I understand, Spurs, there was a 1-week window this month when Spurs could have recalled him and then loaned him back somewhere else, and Spurs didn't take up that chance, so he will remain there. He wasn't playing the first 2 games. John Mousinho came in as the new manager of Portsmouth. He didn't play a single minute, and I think a few people were like, "Uh-oh." But he did play. He started and played 86 minutes the other day for on Saturday. Yesterday, I've lost track of days for Portsmouth. So, yeah. So that's hopefully he'll get more minutes, but that's him there now as well. So yeah. So there's also always a surprise move, surprise offer in and out. We'll see what they will bring. Whether someone we don't expect to go suddenly gets a chance to leave. And likewise, there will be a name that will be mentioned with Spurs late on, whether it be an agent offering them, putting their name out there. Often when a player is offered to a club by an agent, that sometimes in reports becomes Spurs make an approach or Spurs make a bid for, and when it is often just the agent going, want to sign him? So we'll see what that brings. I think the likelihood at this point, like we say, is that it would be the two, and let's make sure it is two. Let's get Porro over that line, and I think even if it does end up being just the two, like I say, you look at last January, and I think the key for it to be progress, I think, would be last January, Spurs signed 2 season-defining players. They did in Bentancur and Kulusevski. But what they did do, which you heard Conte kind of talking about, and I wouldn't say moaning, but he was pointing out that they had 4 players go out the door. Bryan Gil, Reguilon, Lo Celso and Ndombele. Actually, it was... No, Reguilon didn't go. Sorry, Dele. It was Dele, didn't it? They were the 4. Dele went out permanently to Everton. So he lost 4 players in that window. And so, as he said afterwards, my squad's more balanced, but numerically I'm at a disadvantage, which was why we saw towards the end of the season, had some injuries, 5 young kids, 4 or 5 young kids on the bench in some of the games. What I think, if they get Porro done, along with Danjuma, and let's say Bryan Gil goes out the door, maybe that's it, maybe obviously like Harvey White and Jed Spence, people like that. I don't think the squad is as compromised numerically as it was. If anything, it's a healthy amount of players, and you've got 2 in every position pretty much, and 2 that probably Conte trusts, which is quite important as well. So I would say it's progress. I do think they still need to upgrade certain areas, and yes, I've said the ones that they're going to do or look to do in the summer. And they can't just obviously rest on his laurels, but as Conte said, it's a multi-transfer window thing. He said it's going to be improve this squad over a course of transfer windows. It wouldn't be perfect. I wouldn't give it like probably even an 8, 9 or 10 transfer window, but I think they would be 2 good signings. I do think Danjuma is going to make an impact, and I do think Porro will certainly make an impact. It would be far more... Look, I said it a billion times. The system needs the right wing-backs to make it work. I do think Porro is going to... If he's not going to use Jed Spencer, which still maintain works in that system, if he's not going to use him, then Porro is going to be your most similar alternative, and obviously with much more top-flight experience. So, yeah. And actually, the attacking numbers to back it up as well. So... let's see what happens, but I will do a full window wrap. This probably, unless something huge breaks and I have some time tomorrow, it's likely to be the last video before the end of the transfer window, and I'll do a big wrap of the window on Wednesday. It doesn't mean I'm gonna, spit some bars. I'm just going to talk about the window, and we'll talk about all the good things and bad things, and hopefully we'll have some little behind the scenes stuff on some of the things that can't really quite report on yet, but we'll be able to afterwards. Let's see how it all goes. I'm just praying, quite frankly, that by the time this video goes out, stuff in it isn't incredibly out of date. Like I said, that message about Bryan Gil as it was going on, and that Sevilla are pushing hard for him. I've just seen actually the tweets come up as well that it's been reported out there as well anyway, so nothing new there, but we knew they were among the ones that want him, and obviously are going to be pushing hard for him. And he'll want to go. Of course he'll want to go when he's seen Danjuma come through the door. He needs it. But we'll see on Pedro Porro. Like I say, the plan is for the medical to be tomorrow, if Sporting allow it. If they don't, then of course it'll be pushed till Tuesday. Let's just hope it all gets pushed through, because... I don't even want to think about it. I don't want to be doing a video going, oh, God. I really don't want to do that video. So I'm going to head off now. Just keep an eye on my Twitter account. I'm going to try and get as much latest stuff and work in the next 2 days. I've got a long shift on deadline day. I will be working right up, I think, until midnight on deadline day. I remember most windows, even if it's just players going out the door, like youth loans, there's normally stuff that's verified way after the window closes. So yeah, it's going to be a late one. So Wednesday I'll look even more knackered than I do right now. But it'll all be worth it if we get to the end of it and it's been a positive one for Spurs. Hopefully it will. Yeah. Right, time to head off. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.